let me just dive right in. Hey, look, one of the things that we at NEC have been working through over the past couple of months is trying to understand what type of world we're going to live in and how might the technologies that we bring to market could support this new world. How do we get the economies of the world going again, and how do we provide social value creation? And that is one of our social creeds, one of our corporate creeds here at NEC, is to understand how to support society. So, and what we see in this world is more of a touchless world, a contactless world, and a lot of the technologies that NEC brings to market can enable some of that new world. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, it's funny. We were at Connect ID only 2 months ago, and some of these terms and these vocabulary words were not a part of our common vernacular, but today they are. You know, I remember being on the floor in Washington, D.C., and it was about you know, March 12th or so, and we were talking about things in a very different way. But today we're talking about social distancing. We're talking about limiting the amount of people who can come into buildings or restaurants or certain establishments or government facilities. We're also talking about elevated body temperature screening and determining if somebody might have a fever and how that might contribute to someone being sick. And then obviously a need for more touchless solutions in the world, whether that's allowing people to enter or to pay for things or to leave a building or to leave a country or enter a country. And then obviously contact tracing. These are just some of the new words that we've been talking about. And if you look back to March or February, none of these words were really in our vernacular. We were talking only about things through the lens of, through the lens of efficiency and customer experience and things like that. But today, what we're doing is we're looking at how can we, as a company, contribute to this revitalization of our economy and the fabric of society. And some of the technologies that we brought to market in the past, we believe that some of those can be changed, they can be modernized, and we can bring those to bear to meet this new challenge. And some of them you know, some of them you may not know. And those are some of the ones that I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, elevated body temperature screening is one that you've seen in the press a lot. You've seen people talk about it. And I do think that this is something that's going to be more commonplace across not only our country, but the globe. Video analytics, scene processing. Facial recognition was a very powerful technology, and it still is. But now we have to contend with new challenges around masks. How do we get a highly accurate, high-performing algorithm to work with masks when you've got large portions of the face occluded? And what does that mean for matching rates? Obviously, counting people. How do we use artificial intelligence or machine learning to count the number of people who are coming into a building or leaving a building? These are all some of the technologies that we've been talking about over the past 2 months with our customers and stakeholders. And there's a lot of interest in how we can apply these to these new use cases we see out in the world. Some of the customers that we've been talking to, they span the spectrum, right? So we've been obviously talking to the federal government. They have a keen interest when it comes to immigration or transportation security to get things back on track and something that looks like normal. The aviation sector, obviously, they're dealing with a massive change in operations. We're talking about a 90% drop in travel around the world. And a lot of destinations are completely cut off from where they were just 2 months ago. And so how do we implement some of these technologies to get this industry moving again? Obviously, our healthcare system is at limit, or it's been strained beyond the limit. So there's a lot of interest from the healthcare industry about how do we prevent the spread of the disease, but also enable a more touchless, contactless world. We've talked to financial services providers, and they are looking to accelerate the adoption of some of this technology. And you often see this whenever there is a disaster or a large disruptive event throughout history. New technologies are often looked to help serve as a tool. They're never a panacea, but they are a tool in the tool bag that people can use to get back to some level of equilibrium. Physical access for buildings, contactless, touchless interactions with technology will enable us to get back to going in and out of spaces a little bit more freely and a little bit more hygienically. And so we're having a lot of discussions with folks about that. And then obviously it goes without saying, the retail and the hospitality industry are two industries that have been severely hit by this downturn. So we're talking to some of them about how do we get some of these things that we used to hold so dear back and moving. How do we get people back into the stores shopping if they feel comfortable? How do we get the hospitality industry up and going again? We've talked to a lot of concessions providers who are interested in contactless, touchless solutions for payment or for keeping social distance, physical distance from people. And so these are definitely solutions that we're talking about. So let me give you a couple of use cases to give you a little bit of background about NEC for folks who may not know who we are. One of our proudest customers, we're very proud to be a provider of technology to DHS, Customs and Border Protection, but also we work with Star Alliance and a number of other airlines. And one of the things that we've had a lot of success with was the development of facial recognition technology and implementing it for a contactless interaction, curb to gate. And you know, there's a lot of value to see in this type of solution. We're talking about shorter lines, stronger security, but also, you know, we talked a lot about throughput, but now I think we're gonna pivot. Everybody's having more conversations about not just getting people through the airport as quickly as possible, but how do we get them safely through the airport in a hygienic manner and make sure that there's distance between those individuals, and how do we make travelers, how do we enable them to feel more safe and comfortable and establish a high level of customer confidence that they can travel to a destination and not get sick. That's a real challenge, but these are some of the issues that we've got to be able to grapple with. Obviously, we're having similar conversations with Delta, but we've had a lot of success with them in the past. We've been a proud partner of theirs, especially in Atlanta, implementing the you know, a touchless environment that is enabled with facial recognition. And so we deployed this solution in Atlanta's airport in Terminal F in 2018. And we had enormous success with this. And this was check-in to bag drop to going through TSA and then boarding your flight. This was a largely touchless solution. It was still a two-step process where you had to potentially touch a screen to opt in to begin the process, or to scan your boarding card, and then a facial recognition check would start. But I think more and more what we're talking about now is how do we get that down to one-step process, or maybe it's just the facial recognition check. But we've had a lot of success, and even though there's some challenges ahead, you know, Delta is still committed to some of these types of solutions, and I think you're going to see other aviation partners doing the same. And obviously, one of the things that, like I mentioned, the elevated body temperature has been something that's been on everybody's mind. We've learned a lot about it in the past couple of months. NEC has a background in this, which I'll get to a little bit later. But we've definitely spent a lot of time. I know I've had to get a lot smarter on this type of solution, but we've been working with members of the gaming community. A major casino out west has decided to deploy some of this to get their doors open and to establish a little bit of customer confidence. Again, I have to stress, you know, these aren't panaceas. This is not going to necessarily detect with 100% accuracy that someone does have a fever, but it's another tool that screeners can use to determine if somebody does have an elevated body temperature, and how could we manage that, right? Would there be a way to pull them to secondary or pull them aside and give them a more accurate, closer temperature check to determine if they might be sick or pose a threat to somebody else around them? So these are just some of the solutions and some of the use cases that we're seeing out there. So digging in a little bit deeper with some of our solutions, like I mentioned, you know, I think that looking ahead, the way that we are going to interact with each other in this new world, this new economy, this new post-pandemic world, and as we potentially prepare for the future pandemic, you're going to see more of these types of technologies that are touchless and contactless, whether that's through facial access for physical access to buildings, or EBT, what we're calling EBT, elevated body temperature, scene processing, using your face to pay for things, and then also in the aviation space, maintaining distance and decreasing the number of touch points. I think you're going to see a lot more of these solutions, and we're getting a lot of interest from the customers and the community out there who want to see some of this implemented. So facial access is interesting. Physical access to spaces. We all know that when we go into a secure facility like the Pentagon or another military installation or a government building, or even in the private sector, when you're entering a corporate office building, there's always the metal gates, and there's usually a keypad with a requirement to have two-factor or multi-factor authentication with a badge and then a key, and then you enter in a number. We're talking to people who are very interested now in combining those gates with either facial recognition or doing away with some of the man traps where the gates don't just stop you. They want to be able to allow people to walk through, but they still need to ensure that it is the right person that's coming into the building, and they should be there, and there's still an accurate match on the face. So implementing some of that access is what we've already started to talk to some people about. But like I mentioned earlier, some of the challenges there is how do we maintain that high level of accuracy with facial recognition, given that there might be a mask there. So we've implemented some technologies. We started to test for some around detecting if someone has a mask, and then being able to do the identification from the features of the face that are exposed. And so we have in the past, as NEC, we've tested for masks in the past. Obviously, we're all very interested in what NIST might do moving forward. I know they've announced some testing, but we're looking forward to see how that matures. But we do see this technology taking off, and I see a greater adoption of it in the future. Obviously, EBT screening. This is something that we have a history with in Asia. When the last large outbreak happened, it obviously wasn't as large as COVID-19, but when Ebola broke out, a lot of places in Asia implemented some of this technology, and we were one of those implementers. And when people would come into the country of Japan, this solution would do some of that screening and enable a health official or security official to sort of manage it appropriately. I think one of the big challenges here in the United States that we face is how do we manage that process, whether it's a traveler coming into the airport or coming into the country. Once that person is potentially deemed to be sick, the challenge is going to be how do we manage that person? How do officials manage that person? That's going to be a big challenge for aviation experts, people in the aviation industry, but also for the federal government. But we do have this type of technology, and we've also been able to combine it with facial recognition, where we grab the visible light plus the IR light and process them simultaneously to determine, does this person have an elevated body temperature, and is it the same person that we expect to see or the same person that matches in our database. Now, just digging in a little bit more about how we've done this, the use case here from a high level, we've broken it out into two different approaches. On the left-hand side there, you'll see it's sort of a pause and go, where we're using facial recognition with elevated body temperature. And there's always a screener in the loop here to be able to take a look and say, okay, does this person have an elevated body temperature? And is it the right person? Did it match properly? And then on the right-hand side, it's more of a batch processing where you're using video analytics to allow people to more freely flow through. There's always going to be some challenges of making sure that we can get the image, both from the facial recognition perspective, but also for the elevated body temperature. There's some challenges associated with that. But again, as I stressed, this is a tool in the screener's toolbox to be able to use and raise the level of confidence. And as you see here in this, the screenshot we've got here, this is the security officer's view. This would be the visible light and the IR light. And then you see the transactions coming through with the facial recognition matches. And it's hard to see on this screen, but the temperature is displayed up there too. And what we want to do, our approach has been to be vendor agnostic when it comes to the EBT sensor, the thermal sensor. So we want to go with best of breed. There's different requirements for different use cases. So if we need to swap out that sensor, we want to have that flexibility. And what allows us to do that is that digital services platform right there in the center. And that is our cloud or our on-premises solution that enables some of these microservices that I have been talking about, but I'll talk about in the slides to follow. But this has been the approach that we've been coming up with over the past couple months in the wake of the pandemic. So I mentioned some of the microservices. So within that stack that I mentioned, that platform, what we've decided to do at NEC is we're going to market with a platform that will allow customers to spin up or spin down certain types of services. And so obviously the facial recognition is something that we're well known for, but also we want to bring to market object recognition, people counting, how many people are in a room, are there crowds of people that are clumping together? All of these types of services can be enabled through that engine, that platform. And also, it's not just a platform for processing all these types of data or with algorithms. It also has the ability to do what some may consider more mundane tasks, but they're enormously useful. It can do sensor management, right? So if a sensor on the edge is going down, such as an e-gate or one of our facial recognition devices or another type of sensor around the perimeter, this platform can also be used to manage those devices and determine if there's a problem and potentially remote into that device and conduct some maintenance work. So it's a very powerful platform, and I think that it's definitely something that can provide value to a lot of customers. Face pay is something that we've been talking about for a long time in the financial industry sector. There are a lot of banks out there that have been looking at this for a long time. We do know the value it brings as far as like preventing fraud and theft of various credit cards or other types of instruments that might be physical. But you know, it's not just something that we put on a slide and talk about. We're starting to see it really materialize. Obviously, a lot of the implementations have taken place in Asia, but also most consumers are very comfortable with Apple Pay using their face. And so I think that the more widespread adoption you see of this technology, the more comfortable consumers will become with it. And especially in a post-pandemic world, where they want to see more contactless, touchless experiences, this is definitely something that we see as being adopted. And in one of the recent, as you see there, one of the recent surveys, we see that an overwhelming amount of consumers are interested in this type of technology. We do have an implementation in Japan where they've done curb to gate with facial recognition for bag check and everything else in the aviation sector, but they've also added an opt-in option for face pay. So at certain participating vendors in the city in Japan, you can use this technology to pay for certain items in that ecosystem if you opt in. So I definitely think you're going to see more of these types of implementations moving forward. And obviously, along that travel ribbon, many of you have probably seen this before, from home to check-in to when you're planning your trip, to booking it, to boarding your flight or going to the hotel and buying food and drinks. I think that what we've seen with some of our customers is that you're going to see more and more of a desire to adopt some of this contactless, touchless technology, so that consumers can remain safe and put some distance between them. But also, there's still a desire for a better customer experience and greater digital transformation. And I know those are buzzwords that we've talked about a lot in the past, but they're still alive and well. And I think a lot of consumers and a lot of providers of services are very interested in providing that to their customers. So just to kind of sum up, I know we got started late, so I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. But as we start to summarize here, we are in a different place than we were back in March at the Connect ID conference. And I can't say that we had talked about hygiene and a lot of those types of safe distancing concepts last year, but definitely February, March, and April, these have definitely come to the forefront. But some of the things around seamless, frictionless, touchless environments, they definitely are resonating with everybody now. But people still want a personalized experience, and all of these types of solutions can still provide that. We just have to think about how to do it in a more thoughtful way and a deliberate way. And obviously at NEC, we're very proud of who we are as a company. We're 120 years old, very stable. We've got a large portfolio of patents, and we spend very large sums of money on R&D, and that enables us to pivot quickly and to bring in new types of solutions that I've discussed here today to our portfolio, but also to our customers. And in the months ahead, as we start to deploy more of this, I think that we'll learn more, and these solutions will get even better. And then finally, just to bring it all together, one of the things that a lot of people know us for is our facial recognition and our other biometric technologies. We've been ranked #1 in NIST trials for the past decade, and we're very proud of that. And we want to use that momentum to build upon it. But we've also had a lot of success with our iris technology and our fingerprint technology. And so we think that that's a good foundation for a lot of the other technologies that we've presented here today. So with that, I'll pause, I'll be brief and get off the stage, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Orchestrating a brighter world. NEC.